This building may not be very familiar to you, but I'm sure that the magazines we make inside are. This is the home of Future Publishing, Europe's biggest publisher of computers magazines. My name's Steve Jarrett, and I'm the editor of one of those magazines, perhaps the best known of all, Amiga Format. Before we get down to business, perhaps you'd like to take a look inside. These are the offices of the biggest, best, and most famous Amiga magazine, Amiga Format. And here are a few of the people that work long and hard to bring you the most read Amiga magazine on the newsstands. Behind me is Sue White, Amiga Format's art editor. She's responsible for making sure the magazine looks as good as it does. This is Richard Jones. He's our production editor. He reads everything we write, takes out all the spelling mistakes, and makes sure it's fit to print. And this is Nick Veach, consultant editor and Amiga Format's resident technical expert. Anyway, let's leave them to get on with their work. Let's go to my desk. Okay, learning how to use a paint package can be tricky when you don't have someone there to show you what to do. That's where we're sure this video will come in handy. In it, we'll be showing you how the software works and some of the basic tricks of bitmap painting. Now, over to our personal paint expert. I hope you find this tutorial informative and useful.
Hello there, and welcome to our video about personal paint. This excellent paint package for the Amiga 1200 and other 1MB computers has to some extent stolen the thunder of Deluxe Paint, which was once far and away the leading Amiga paint package. You may well have got your copy of Personal Paint free in the box with the new Amiga, in which case you've got yourself a pretty good bargain. During the course of this video, we're going to learn all the basics of using Personal Paint, trying out all the tools to see what they do. You should find it's a good deal easier as a way of getting started than wading through a dull old manual. Once you've either installed your copy of Personal Paint onto a hard disk or booted your machine from the floppy disks, you're ready to start a session with Personal Paint. So let's get straight on with it. Remember, it's always easier to run a powerful program like this from a hard disk drive because it works so much quicker. And we've already got our copy installed on the hard drive and ready to run. To get started, as usual, you just double-click on the icon for the program and wait a few seconds for it to load. And in fact, while we're waiting, it's just worth mentioning that you might as well keep the manual handy all the time you're working. That way, you can look things up easily if you get a bit stuck. Okay, at the top of the screen, you'll see the information bar. Bits of this bar will change as you go along to tell you useful things like which painting mode you've got activated, but at the moment it will just show you the name of the program twice and a small box here which is just to show that you are in colour mode. We'll explain what that is later on. The first thing we're going to do is take a tour of the toolbar, which is this strip of stuff at the left hand side of the screen. There are two main parts of the toolbox, although they're not actually separated from each other. The top part is a set of small squares, each of which contains a drawing tool or function. The smaller part at the bottom is the colour palette, which has a box on it for each colour you can use on your painting. Incidentally, if you want to, you can just hide the toolbar, and you can also hide the information bar at the top of the screen. You'll find this useful later on when you want to see your painting in its full glory, because the picture actually continues underneath the toolbar. Use the toolbar option from the settings menu to hide the toolbar, and use the screen bar option from the same menu to hide the information bar at the top of the screen. You'll now see the picture filling the whole screen, and you can use the same menu options to bring everything back again. One of the first mistakes beginners often make is forgetting to paint in the area that's covered by a toolbar, which makes you look like a bit of a twit, so it's well worth remembering. Okay, back to the action. To use any of the tools in the toolbar, all you have to do is move the mouse pointer over them and click with the left mouse button. Let's choose a really big brush. That's the icon for the big brush there. And we'll also choose the continuous drawing method, which is this icon here. Whenever we click on the main screen now, just once with the left mouse button, an impression of our brush will be left behind. It will be in the colour of whatever palette colour we currently have selected. We'll get onto this in more detail later on, but if you want to use a different colour right now, all you have to do is click on it in the palette down here. Now, because we've chosen the continuous drawing tool, if you hold down the left mouse button while drawing on the screen, you should get a continuous line wherever you draw. Try this with a few more colours, like a nice squiggly mess all over the screen, just to get the hang of the feel. Right, I'm just going to clear the screen now so we can see what we're doing a bit better. We'll mention this again later on, but if you want to clear the screen yourself right now, just click on this little icon here that looks like a dustbin. There we go. Okay, the continuous drawing tool which you've been using up to now is all very well, but you have to have a very steady hand if you want to draw something with straight lines in. Not too good really, is it? There's a much better tool which you can use instead, and that's this one here. If you click on this straight line tool, you notice that when you drag the mouse pointer across the screen, a straight line is automatically drawn from where you started off to wherever you let go of the mouse button. Incidentally, almost everything we do, whether it's clicking on a tool to use or actually drawing on the screen, is done with the left-hand mouse button. If you need to use the right mouse button at any stage, we'll mention that specifically. The next tool to try out, and we'll just do it in a different colour, is this one up here, which is Curve tool. It works in a very similar way to the straight line tool, except that when you release the mouse button, you get a thin, ghosted line. And you'll also notice that it has 4 crosses at various points along its length. If you just click and drag out these crosses, you'll find you can alter the curve to almost any shape you want. Then simply press with the right-hand mouse button to make the curve render. The 4 tools below the Curve tool also help you draw neatly, and they're used for drawing common shapes: circles, squares, ellipses, and polygons. All you have to do is choose whichever one you want, and then click and drag on the screen to make the required shape. Simply let go of the mouse button when it's the size you want. So there's a circle, here's a square, there's an ellipse, and we'll just come on to the polygon tool in a moment. You should also notice that the tools are divided into 2 halves. If you click in the top half of the square, you'll get an outline shape, while if you click in the lower half, you'll get a shape that's filled in solid. So clicking the top half of the square, for example, will give us an outline square, while clicking in the lower half of the square will give us a solid, filled in square. We've left the polygon tool aside for a moment because it's actually a little bit different from circles, squares, and ellipses. Using the polygon tool, you can actually create a shape that has as many straight sides as you want. Simply click for all the corners you want on your shape, and then when you get back to the start, close it up, it will draw your shape for you. A bit later we'll show you how to fill a filled polygon with a pattern rather than just a single colour. You'll have to wait a bit for that. Below the various polygon tools is the airbrush tool, which you can have a bit of fun with. It creates a spray can effect with the currently selected brush colour, so it's quite good for bringing out the graffiti artist in you. Try it out in a few different colours and just make a bit of a mess on the screen. The next one in order is the Fill tool. The icon's meant to look a little bit like a can of paint being spilt, which is pretty much the way this tool works. It floods an area of the screen with the palette colour you've got selected, like that. You have to notice it will only fill up areas that are the same colour as the bit of the screen you clicked on, and it stops as soon as it reaches a different colour. We might as well mention that there's one very obvious use for the Fill tool, and that's for filling in a line drawing. If you're doing a cartoon style drawing, for example, you could just fill the outline in black and then put in the colours afterwards using the Fill tool. This kind of thing. One thing you have to watch out for, however, is any breaks in the lines, because if there are any, you'll find that you're flooding the whole screen, which you might not want to do. We'll actually show you a clever way of tracing a cartoon or outline drawing onto the screen later on, but for now let's press on. The Text tool, over here, enables you to enter normal Amiga text onto the screen. All you have to do is click on the text icon, then click wherever on the screen you want your text to start. Then simply type in whatever letters you happen to want to put, and they'll appear on the screen for you. You might well want to use this for a caption on a picture, or you might actually want to use words as part of your design. If you want to use different size of lettering or a different typeface, you can change the font by clicking on the text icon with the right-hand mouse button. This brings up a requester from which you can select any font you happen to have installed on your workbench. Both the choice of typefaces and the size of lettering available will appear on the screen. And if you're using an A1200 or any other machine which can use CompuGraphic fonts, you can actually type in the size you want down here. Right, let's just put that away and have a look at the next tool here, which is for image processing. Clicking on this will bring up a requester with a list of all the available effects inside it. Just click on the name of an effect you like the sound of and you'll be able to use it straight away. We can't run through all the effects now and show you what they do because it would take hours, so your best bet is to play around with them a little yourself and see what happens. What we can show you, however, is how to try making your own effects. Just bring up the effects requester again and click on the new button up here. You'll now be presented with a screen full of zeros, which represent what's called weighting factors. What we want to do is change some of these numbers to something else. So we'll start by putting a 2 in the middle there, and then we'll put a 1 in each adjacent square. By the time we finish doing this, we should have something that will produce a blur filter for us. With all the numbers put in, we then have to add them all up and put the total, which is 6, into this button labelled div F here, which stands for div factor. If we don't do that, then the final result when we use our filter will be too bright. Now all we have to do is give our filter a name. It doesn't really matter how stupid it is, just type something in and we're almost ready to go. If you go back to the filter selection screen, you'll notice your filter is named here, so just click on proceed and you'll now be able to use your filter. At the moment the effect will operate on a rectangle which you drag out over the screen, and we'll just zoom in a bit here so you can see what we're doing. If we drag a rectangle out over our zoomed area, you'll notice the effect processing start to work. As you can see, it actually takes a while to operate. It has to work out the result of applying an effect to the screen, so don't drag out too large an area or you could be waiting for ages. You'll also notice that if you click on the image processing icon again, the shape of the icon will change to a circle, and you'll now be able to use your image processing effect on a circular area like that. While it's working out, it might look like it's working on a rectangle, but in actual fact it'll only work on the circular area you drew. If you now want to change to a different effect, all you have to do is click on the image processing icon again with the right-hand mouse button and the requester will appear. This range of image processing effects is one of the unique things about Personal Paint which other paint packages don't have, and you'll find you can get all sorts of clever results with them. But let's move on to this strange looking button over here, which turns on the grid. The grid restricts the mouse as it moves around the screen. It can give a rather eccentric effect when you see it like this, but it's actually very useful for accurate drawing. You can set the parameters of the grid by clicking on the icon with the right-hand mouse button. A quick time out here because the next tool we're going to look at is probably the most important of the lot. It's used for cutting out custom brushes. Custom brushes are the most flexible part of computer painting and can be used for all sorts of things, from something as simple as drawing with a big square shape instead of a small round shape, to something as complex as repeating something you've already drawn lots of times all over the screen, or even making a mirror image of part of a picture. You can even use a custom brush to create a fill pattern like wallpaper on a wall. Let's have a look at how it all works. The custom brush tool is over here, so click on it to select it, and you'll now be able to drag a rectangle over an area of your picture. Instead of anything being drawn, however, the area you drag the rectangle over is picked up as a custom brush. You can move the brush around the screen and stamp it down anywhere as often as you want. You can also change the size of the brush. To do this, go to the brush menu at the top of the screen, up here, and select the Resize Stretch option. Incidentally, to speed things up when you get good at the program, you can use the keyboard instead of the menu. So try pressing Shift and Z at the same time, and you'll notice the effect will be exactly the same as using the menu option. You'll find that there's quite a lot of these keyboard shortcuts available throughout the program. We'll mention some of the most useful ones as we go along. Anyway, whether you use the menu or the keyboard shortcut, you'll get the same result. You now have hold of the bottom right-hand corner of the brush. To size it, you just click and hold down the left mouse button and drag the corner around to make the brush whatever size and shape you want. Of course, resizing your brush can make it look a little odd, especially when you squash it or stretch it out. This is particularly noticeable when you have a brush with fine detail in it. If you make it too small, some of this detail is bound to be lost. Rotating your brush can be very useful too. I'll just cut out a fresh brush so you can see how this works. We'll also clear the screen. There we have our brush. If you go to the brush menu and select the rotate any angle option, you should find that the brush appears as a very faint outline anchored at the bottom right hand corner. Now just click and drag until the outline is at whatever angle you want it to be at, and then let go. The Amiga could take some time to actually draw this on the screen, depending on how big your brush is, because it's actually rather a complicated piece of mathematics for it to do. But at least it tells you this time how long it's going to take about it. Just wait until it's finished. And there you have your rotated brush. As well as the rotate any angle option, you can also just flip the brush 90 degrees, which takes almost no time to draw on the screen and can be immensely useful for drawing symmetrical objects. If you wanted to draw an ornate picture frame, for example, you could just draw one corner of it like this, and then pick it up as a brush. You could then flip it horizontally and vertically using the X and Y keys on the keyboard, and use this to stamp down the other three corners so that you don't actually have to draw the whole thing. You might also find that the flip options are good for creating a mirror image of something. But let's move on to something else. In the ordinary paint mode, any of the background colour that you've picked up with the brush will remain transparent. We can change this by going to the brush menu and selecting paint mode and then replace. Again, instead of going to the menu, you could just press the F3 key on the keyboard. You'll now notice that the background colour in the brush is a solid colour that will paint over whatever you stamp it down on. The other paint mode you will see on the same menu is colour. This simply replaces all the colours in the brush with the currently selected palette colour, which is a useful way of getting yourself a whacking great brush to paint over large areas of the screen, and can also be used for shadow effects. Another useful option can be outlining your brush to make it stand out from the background you're stamping it down on. The simple outline just edges the brush with the currently selected palette colour, which is the example top left here. But other effects include embossing, which gives a lighter outline on the top and the left, and a heavier outline bottom and right, and a 3D style effect, which gives just a shadow on the right and bottom. There's also a square option, which gives square edges to all the outlines. One useful little tip is using the outline brush option repeatedly to get a thicker outline, but play around for yourself. Right, let's look a little more at brushes. Personal Paint will allow you to have up to 9 custom brushes in memory at any one time, and you can choose between them by clicking on the number in the brush section of the toolbar, which is up here. You need to use the right mouse button to make the numbers appear. You can actually also load and save brushes using the brush menu up here. Brushes can also be used to modify the way the line drawing tools work. If you right-click on the line drawing tool, a requester will appear, and you can now choose the pattern from the first line of any of your brushes. Now that we've looked at brushes in some detail, it might be a good idea to go back and take another look at the fill requester. Just click on the fill tool with the right-hand mouse button, and the area fill settings window will appear. This controls how the fill function works. If you want to fill an area with a pattern instead of a solid colour, this is the place to set it up. First you have to cut out as a brush the pattern you want to use as a fill, which we've done already. Then you just choose the brush that you want from the numbers at the bottom of the requester and click on Proceed. The fill pattern not only works on the flood fill tool, but also on the other fills as well. So let's pick a filled rectangle and see what our fill looks like. Okay, let's have a quick look at some other kinds of fills apart from solid colours and patterns. Go back to the fill settings window, and this time move the dither pattern slider here. This creates a dither pattern, you can see it up here, between these two solid colours. The reason you might want to do this is because it creates the impression of a completely new colour that's a mixture of your two dither colours. If you're working with a limited palette of perhaps only 32 colours, then this will give you a whole range of extra shades. To choose different colours to mix together, you can left click on any colour in the palette or in the image to choose the final colour, and right click to choose the start colour. Another kind of fill is the gradient fill, which is set in this part of the requester here. There are two boxes underneath the gradient window, the first of which selects whether the gradient is between just the two selected colours or between those colours and all the ones in between in the palette. The second button here controls where the bounds of those colours reach to on what you draw. The best way to find out which of these you want to use is to experiment with them all. Before we go any further, let's just finish off looking at the rest of the tools in the toolbar. The magnifying glass tool here is used to zoom in on an area of the screen. Just drag out a box over the area you wish to magnify. The other magnifying glass tool there, incidentally, can be used to change the scale of the zoom. The zoom window also has scroll bars that can be used to navigate easily around the image, and the little hash symbol in the corner turns on and off a thin grid to guide you when you're working. Just click on the magnify tool again to turn it off. Be careful of the trash can tool down here, which clears the screen completely. And make sure you know where the undo tool is, this one here, because it's really useful for getting rid of bad experiments if you make a terrible mistake. And you can even use it to undo a screen clear. We've seen most of the tools now, so let's take a quick look at the palette. You already know it's pretty straightforward to choose a new colour on the palette. All you have to do is click on any of the colour buckets to select that colour for drawing with. To edit the palette so that you have new colours to play with, click with the right-hand mouse button on the box just above the colours. This brings up the palette editing requester, and the complete palette is displayed at the top. If you want to change a colour, you have to click on it on the palette here. The components that make up each colour can be adjusted using these red, green and blue sliders here, each of which has a range of values that goes from 0 to 255. That gives a total colour permutation of 256 times 256 times 256 colours, which is 16,777,216 different shades. In practice, the human eye can't really distinguish between that number of colours, so that's more than enough to going on with. You'll also notice that there are 3 other sliders below the RGB ones, marked H, S and V, which also move when you move the RGB ones. You can use the HSV ones instead of the RGB ones if you want, but they use a very different colour model, which works like this. The top slider controls the hue, or wavelength, of the colour. That actually sets what colour it is. The middle one controls the saturation, which is how pale or deep the colour is. The third one controls the value, which is often known simply as brightness, because basically it controls how black the colour is. Colours can be swapped and copied around the palette using the buttons over here on the right, but we won't go into those in too much detail. We'll just mention the very middle and the middle right ones. These are used for creating ranges between different colours. That's very useful for graduated objects or shadows or something like that. The actual number of colours that you can have in your palette at one time depends on your screen mode. You can have as little as 2 or 4, and it's easy enough to have 32 to choose from. But if you go any higher than this, you have to be careful which screen mode you're using. The place you set both the number of colours and the screen mode is up here in the Project menu, on the Image Format option. The requester that appears will allow you to choose the Amiga screen mode you wish to use, and also the number of colours that you want to use. The screen mode, incidentally, is the resolution at which your Amiga screen operates. The term resolution might not mean an awful lot to you, so now is probably a good time to take a quick look at how bitmap graphics work. If you look close up at a picture on the screen, it looks something like this. You can see that the picture is made up of lots of little blocks of colour, each of which is called a pixel. The word pixel, incidentally, is short for picture element. It's a term invented by television people a long time ago and pinched for computer jargon. Now, the phrase bitmap derives from the fact that the computer stores the data for a picture as a kind of data map, starting at the top left of the screen and working its way along each line and then down the screen until it gets to the bottom right-hand corner. Now, if your picture were in black and white, each pixel could only be either black or white, so you could use just one bit of data to describe that pixel, a bit being a binary digit, a 1 or a 0. So black might be 1 and white might be 0. If you want to have 4 colours in your picture, then you'd need 2 bits for each pixel, because 2 bits gives you 4 combinations of 1 and 0. 1 1, 1 0, 0 1 and 0 0. Each time you add an extra bit, you double the number of colours you have available for any pixel. So 5 bits per pixel gives you 32 colours, and 8 bits per pixel gives you 256 colours. You'll often hear people talking about photographic quality or true colour graphics, which uses 24 bits per pixel, giving a total of over 16 million colours that any pixel could be. In fact, a picture like this one, which only uses 256 colours, looks pretty much like a photo, and that's partly because the screen mode it's in has a high resolution. If you zoom in, as we did before, you'll see that this picture also is made up of pixels, but that they're smaller. The smaller the pixels are, the less noticeable they are, so diagonal straight lines on a low-resolution picture will look more jagged than similar lines on a high-resolution image. So a screen mode combines two things: the number of colours you can use and the resolution at which the display operates. What you should do is flick through all the screen modes on the image format requester and see how many colours you're allowed in each screen mode by clicking this slider down here. You might not be able to use all the screen modes either. You may be restricted by the amount of RAM memory you have or by which type of machine you're using. You'll soon discover that by pressing the J key, you can swap to a spare screen and load in another picture. And you can even cut bits out from one picture as a brush and paste them in to the other picture. One problem you'll soon come across, however, is that more likely than not, the two pictures will have completely different palettes. And so the bit you're copying over will go funny colours. What you need to do is find some spare colours in the palette and change them to the colours you need for the brush from the other picture. Something that will help you to do this is the statistics option from the colour menu. This will count all the pixels on the screen and display a bar graph showing how much each colour is used. Any colour that's not in use is a prime target for being changed. Alternatively, you can merge the palettes of two images or brushes using the Merge option from the Colour menu. This operation works out which colours are used the least in both images and attempts to remap all the colours to keep both images the same as far as possible. Incidentally, if you want to merge two 32 colour images, then it's a good idea to set the image format of one of them to 64 colours. You can also load and save your palette settings using the Colour menu, and it's even possible to load palettes from brushes or even from completely different pictures. The next thing you should know about is the stencil. This is used to protect areas of the picture that you've already drawn and can be incredibly useful. What you first have to do is go to the Colour menu, select the Stencil option, and then select Edit. This will bring up a requester that looks like this. It looks a bit like a palette requester because it has a square for each colour in the palette. You can lock any colour in the picture either by clicking on the square in the requester or by actually clicking on the colour in the image. If you now click Proceed, that colour will be locked. If a colour is locked, you then won't be able to change it on the picture until you unlock it again. So if we try drawing over our picture here, you'll see we can draw over every colour except for the ones that we've locked. When you want to lock all the colours except one, which you might want to do, for example, if you just want to draw over one colour in a picture, the easiest way is to simply click on the one colour that you want to be able to draw over and then click on Invert. Now click on Proceed. You'll notice that all the colours are locked except for that one. You'll then find that you can draw where that one colour is, but not anywhere else. Round about now, we ought to think about saving our work of art and have a quick chat about file formats. To save your picture, you can either hold down the Amiga key and press S on the keyboard, or you can call up the save requester from the Project menu. This is a fairly standard file requester, so clicking on Volumes will bring up a list of the disks that are available. The buttons down the right-hand side over here select the file format to use. Normally, you'll want to use ILBM, which stands for Interleaved Bitmap. This is a picture file format that only the Amiga uses, although some PC graphic programs now use it as well. You might hear people talk about IFF files, and that's pretty much the same thing. IFF actually stands for Interchange File Format. The GIF and PCX formats really belong to other machines, such as the PC and Macintosh. But Personal Paint can also load and save files in these formats, which is pretty handy if you want to swap pictures over to other computers. It's just worth mentioning the other two options. Crypt will ask you for a password, without which no one else will be able to look at the picture you save. And finally, using this one here, you can save out your image as C source code, which programmers will find makes life a good deal easier. We're almost finished, but before we go, here's a handy tip for anyone who, like me, isn't a particularly good artist. If you find a piece of clear plastic, you can actually trace a picture with a marker pen. You can then trace it on the screen using the continuous drawing tool. The result might not be perfect, but by the time you've tidied it up a bit and coloured it, it'll look pretty good. Well, that's about it for our introduction to Personal Paint. I hope you've had fun and that you've found out a lot about your paint program. There are plenty more things to be discovered though, so explore and experiment, and above all, have fun.
We've produced this series of videos as part of our commitment to you, our readers. If you have any suggestions on how we should improve the videos or the magazine itself, please write to me, Steve Jarrett, at the address at the end of this video. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again soon.
Additional videos in the Amiga format range include Personal Paint, an introduction to the A1200 hard drives, upgrading your machine, Music X, Multimedia, Desktop Video Volume 1, Desktop Video Volume 2, and finally the Amiga Format Guide to Clarissa. Priced at just $14.99 each, or any three for $34.95, they represent excellent value for money. For further details, contact BVG at the address given at the end of this video.